Hello everybody, this is Mithril Zenith, and I just finished another run through of Legend of Grimrock 2. I love this game. It's a first-person dungeon crawler type game. Dungeon crawler, puzzle solver, first-person combat, RPG in a more classic RPG vein. It's a great game. I love it. I've played it through a lot of times. I finally did the last build or two that I've been wanting to try. And so I'm going to tier all of the skills in Legend of Grimrock 2. Now, every time you level up, you get these skills, you get points to put into skills. Your class doesn't determine like what skills you have. Every class has access to every skill, but your class will give you certain benefits that encourage some skills over others. Like, for instance, the knight gets like extra protection or lighter weight armor. And so armor is better for knights than necessarily for like wizards, who wizards might want to specialize in magic. They have the ability to cast spells without having to have focus, and they get more mana per level up. Stuff like that. So, what are we going to tier these in? First of all, optimal is basically you will want this skill on at least one character all the time. It's the optimal choice, optimal build around endgame equipment requires it, stuff like that. Solid build are skills that you're not really going to be unhappy by putting all your points into. They might not be the strongest, but they're solid. Supportive are skills that you'll put a couple of points into in order to get some bonus factors out of or to reach certain breakpoints, but you're not really building, you know, a supportive skill focused build. Mediocre are skills maybe you'll put 1 point in order to get the benefits of something else that requires it, but that's about it. And then don't bother are skills where honestly just don't bother putting any stats into them, and it kind of kills me to say that. Start off strong. Let's start off strong. Athletics. Well, athletics is a supportive skill. Athletics gives you hit points. Tier 3 athletics. Let me find where it was, just so I don't get any of this information wrong. Yeah, Tier 3 increases your carrying capacity. It's supportive. You'll throw some points into here when you have extra points to spare. Helps early game because it's 20 health per skill point, which is a lot, but by the late game, it doesn't necessarily matter as much. Your levels will be giving you the points you need. Armor, I'm going to put armor in optimal because heavy armor, using heavy armor without penalties is great. There are 2 top tier sets. Okay, there are 5 armor sets that have set bonuses in the game. There's 1 light armor, 2 heavy armor, and 2 that don't require an armor skill. The 2 heavy armor pieces are the armor sets are the crystal armor set, which provides health and resistance to everything, I think, or it's health and energy at a full combo, and meteor, which provides just maximum protection and then gives fire resistance for the full set. Either way, armor is very important. It increases the protection for every armor piece you get, and you really want to wear these armors without penalties because it's a pretty strict evasion penalty if you don't. I guess I might put it under solid build, but I think I'm gonna put it into optimal because, like, yeah, it's mostly evasion penalties, but the extra protection that you get, 20 to 25%, is still very good. Accuracy I'm going to put under supportive because generally you'll be getting 1 or 2 points of this if you are a weapon attacker. It increases your accuracy by a flat 10 per skill point. Dexterity increases it by like around 3 per stat point. Some weapons, not very many, have accuracy bonuses. And at second skill level you can do melee attacks from the back row. So if you have like a back row rogue who wants to use melee attacks, or you just want to have everyone have melee weapons because you don't want to bother with ammunition or stuff like that, or spells, then yeah, accuracy. Never a bad thing to have, but it's not really a build around. Alchemy, you pretty much need at least one character with 5th level alchemy to play this game on hard mode, unless you are very good and very lucky. Because alchemy allows you to make potions. You don't necessarily need an alchemist, though I think alchemist is probably the most overpowered skill in the game because it gives you copies of herbs. But you need to level alchemy up to 5 in order to craft resurrection potions. You need 4th level to craft major healing and energy potions. And if you want to craft bombs, bombs aren't necessary, but they're really good for cheesing certain fights. 5th level lets you craft 3 bombs at once. Basically, also you need 5th level in order to make stat increase potions using all of the crystal flowers found in the game. If you don't have level 5 alchemy, you will be working under so many limitations and restrictions that it's just like, look, even if you're not running an alchemist, consider very greatly, like, I'm going to put alchemy as top tier optimal here. To the point where I might even just put armor into solid build. Just because alchemy, and armor technically is more supportive anyway, but I'm putting it under solid build just to show it's a support skill that's more important than these support skills in my opinion. Concentration as well gets that same effect because it increases your energy by 20 for each skill point. It increases your energy regeneration while resting at 3rd rank. But the important thing about concentration is that it allows you to cast so many other spells, most spells, and allows you to use focus items that allow you to cast spells with the item in your hand. And it allows you to use the special effects of any sort of magical item. Some of them just require a skill in that particular type of magic, but concentration gives you so much access to items, special effects, extra spells, or spells you can only cast with concentration, or that require concentration, like light, darkness, force field is incredibly powerful. Yeah, solid build. Concentration is a solid build. It's supportive, yes, but you are, like, pretty much always going to have some points in concentration if you're doing anything with magic at all. I'm putting critical under supportive as well. So critical allows you to backstab with light weapons. Backstab deals triple damage. At third rank, you can just do it with a dagger, and at 5th rank, you can do it with any light weapon. I still feel critical is a supportive skill. I don't think that the critical build... I don't know, the critical build is interesting, but it really relies on other things, and it relies on positioning, and it becomes pretty hard to make use of later in the game, because it's going to be really hard to get a back strike on almost anything unless you freeze it. And so basically you're requiring light weapons, because you can only crit with light weapons, max critical, and water magic in order to freeze enemies, and luck, hoping that the water magic actually freezes, or alchemy to make freeze bombs constantly so you can freeze the enemy and go around and backstab them. It's too much work to make do, but I will put it in supportive because some extra critical strike chance is nice when you have nothing else. Debating putting it under mediocre because I think it's just all you need is just the 1 point of crit. Yeah, no, I'm putting it in mediocre. You just need 1 point in crit in order to use the devastation special skill of Bane. Outside of that, you're only putting crit in when you have nothing else that you want. In fact, I'll put athletics down under mediocre as well because of that same thing. Accuracy, I think, is a little bit more viable to call supportive. And concentration is more supportive. That you're getting it for its extra benefits, but it's not like you're built around. Dodge is supportive as well. Kind of like armor is supportive, dodge is supportive. I think dodge is more niche than armor. Why don't I just do all the supportive skills here, and then the mediocre ones can go into mediocre. Yeah, let me just assemble more of the tier list before I start talking about it. Dodge increases evasion by 3 for each skill point. At 3rd skill level, cooldown period is decreased by 10%. That cooldown 10% decrease is very powerful. Definitely consider level 3 dodge for that. And if you're going to be dodge tanking, like you have a rogue in the full rogue set, then dodge can be really good for frontlining for that. But just be careful with dodge, because if you're fighting things that do have good accuracy, you're not going to be able to avoid their attacks very reliably, and you're going to die. I'm going to call firearms mediocre. I've done the build 2 or 3 times. Alchemist gets bonuses supposedly to firearms, but they're just not that great. They have set damage that doesn't scale with your stats. They have limited ammo that can't be picked back up, so you have a limited number of uses possible. You can't craft additional ammo. You can't really farm for it. Very few enemies drop it, and if they do, they drop like barely any. And it's super unreliable, and those enemies don't always respawn. And the biggest weapon that you get, the cannon one, takes up so much weight in your inventory. It's 15 for the cannon and a pound for each cannonball, and it does a lot of damage at range. And then you can use it 20 times and then you're out. And so you're constantly... if you make a firearm build, you'll be constantly not using your firearms because there's not enough ammunition to use it for the whole game. You have to kind of pick and choose your fights when you do a firearm build. I don't like doing the firearm build. I think it's mediocre. I think there's a lot of better things you can do with your time. Heavy weapons is optimal. Which means light weapons is just a solid build. Light weapons, there are some good things you can do with it. Dual wield sickle blades for a high dexterity build. I think sickle blades are dexterity, or no, sickle blades. Most heavy weapons and most light weapons are strength based. Only a few light weapons are dexterity based. It was either the sickle blade or it's the serpent blade that you find in the desert that's dexterity based. That's the highest dex based weapon in the game. Other than that, it's all strength based still. And light weapons, their special skills are niche. They're different. There's a lot of light weapons you get early on that have special skills that need like 1 point in earth magic or 1 point in lightning or fire, stuff like that. And they're good weapons for like early on in the game. But the best weapons in the game are all heavy weapons. Bane, the Ancient Claymore, the Meteor Hammer. Heck, even just the great axes and are all heavy weapons. There are so many good heavy weapons, and yes, heavy weapons do take longer to swing, and so you're going to be waiting on that cooldown for longer. But heavy weapons are just, they give you that big burst damage, and if you can avoid it, you're not going to be standing still waiting for the thing to come off cooldown. You're going to be moving around and doing other stuff, managing potions or spells or stuff like that. And so the heavy weapons, actually, the longer swing time can be seen sometimes as a benefit because it allows you more chance to, do that and focus on other things. Yes, it sounds dumb, and I think it is dumb, and I think the long swing time is the downside of heavy weapons. And the fact that there are very few early game heavy weapons that are good is that you really need... all the early game weapons you get are light weapons, but the strongest weapons in the game are heavy weapons, and so it is optimal to use heavy weapons over light weapons. With that out of the way, throwing is mediocre. I almost kind of want to put throwing into don't bother. Yeah, screw it. Throwing is don't bother. You get a decent amount of throwing weapons in the game. They're fine, just kind of support weapons, but none of them require throwing skill. At 5th skill level, you can throw two weapons at once, weapon from both hands, but that means that you're putting throwing weapons in both your hands, which is fine up like on your Switch. But I think that, sorry, bump the mic. I think that throwing weapons they really don't provide that much benefit. No cool skills or anything. It's just, okay, cool, I can do some damage at range, and then I can, if I can get over to the place where I threw the weapons, I can pick them up. Great. By that standpoint, missile weapons are also mediocre. I think that, I don't know, ranged attacks in general in Legend of Grimrock, ranged weapons in general, are just not great. Apologies, that's my daughter. Just does not want to be taking a nap right now. Ranged weapons are not that great, and that's by design. By design, ranged weapons aren't great because ranged weapons are so much more flexible than melee weapons. You have to be up close to hit with a melee weapon. You don't with a ranged weapon. And because of that, they can get away with being a lot worse. And I think that they're still viable. Don't get me wrong. They're mediocre, but they're still viable. But what do you actually get from putting points into missile weapons? At 4th skill, your missile weapon attacks ignore 20 points of enemy's armor. That's pretty useful, because most missile weapons don't have very high base damage. And so if they can't ignore armor, then you're just, like, pinging them for 1 all the time. The extra damage is nice. Some of the skills are nice. A couple of the bows get the volley skill at 5th rank, which allows you to fire 2 or 3 arrows in quick succession. And then you have the lightning bow, which can do lightning arrows, but I think it's only a limited number of them before you have to recharge it using a recharge crystal, which are limited as well. Yeah, missile weapons and throwing are just overrated. Don't bother with them. Or rather, don't bother putting points into them. Use them when you have them, but you're never required to put points into them. Speaking of put points into these, fire magic is optimal. And air magic is optimal. Water magic is supportive, and earth magic is don't bother. I guess that means I might need to mix stuff up here a little bit just to show what I mean. Yeah, I'll bump armor back up to solid builds. I'll bump concentration back up to solid builds. Because there is still... No, concentration is still definitely supportive. Yeah, that seems better. Because... Let's talk about it. First of all, earth magic. There are 3 earth spells in the game, and one of them is a shield. There's Poison Cloud, which sets a cloud directly in front of you. The only niche that it has is that it can go through some grate doors without having to open the grate doors, or go through a grate without having to open it. Some of them, but not all of them. Which is a nice niche to be able to weaken some enemies before you fight them, but it's so little damage, it doesn't really matter. Poison Bolt, which you shoot out a Poison Bolt, and at higher skill levels it creates a Poison Cloud as well, and it has a chance to poison enemies, dealing damage over time. Fun fact, if a damage dies to the poison damage over time, it won't always give you experience. It'll act like they died to something else, which kind of feels like a waste. And the poison damage, even though it says that it increases, and you can get that wand in the swamp that increases poison damage, it still is never very much. It's like 20, 30, 40 at most for the impact damage, and then the tick damage is going to be like maybe around 10 at the highest, and it'll quickly go back down to like 1. Poison, it's not that it doesn't help, but it does not feel nearly as impactful as you would want it to feel for dumping all the points into it that you could otherwise have put into something else. Water magic I'm putting up in supportive because it has its water shield, it has ice spikes, and it has frostbolt. Those are the only 3 water spells as well. But technically there's a 4th one, Dispel. And Dispel is necessary for fighting the air elementals. The ones that look like just floating clumps of leaves that dash at you in the House of Pain and whatnot. So water magic, because of that, is pretty solid. It's supportive because if you cast a Frostbolt, it has a chance to freeze. And that freeze chance can put a lot of weight off of you if it procs a lot. And because of Dispel being necessary at least to have 1 point in, and then Ice Spikes is a nice area of effect spell. You get like basically no effective area of effect spells in the game, and so that being your level 1, which does mean that Earth Magic is like a 1-point wonder in that if you're using Ice Spikes, but then Ice Spikes is like a tertiary spell anyway. Yeah. Water Magic's okay. But then we get to Air and Fire Magic. So Air Magic has a shock... Both of them have a level 1 blast spell, which just blasts the tile in front of you. Both of them have a bolt spell, which require, in Fire Magic's case... Oh yeah, also, for your bolt spells, for Water Bolt and Fire Bolt, you need a point of Air Magic in the first place. Earth Magic, I don't think needs Air Magic to cast a Poison Bolt. I think it still needs water magic, though. I don't remember what earth magic needs. Maybe it's just concentration, or maybe it's just earth magic. I'll actually need to check that. Spells. Just so I'm not lying to you. Earth, yeah, Poison Cloud. Poison Bolt, just earth magic too. So I guess in terms of spells, earth magic does have the benefit of being the fewest spell points, or the fewest skill points to get to a ranged spell. But it's very weak. Not really worth your time for a long-term build. Meanwhile, air magic has shock at level 1 for shock the tile in front of you. Lightning bolt at rank 4, which is a high damage range projectile. Invisibility at rank 3 and concentration 2, which renders your party invisible. Enemies can still detect and attack you if you're directly in front of them or right next to them, but it basically allows you to turn off a lot of the enemy chase AI and targeting. You just like turn invisible and walk around enemies or run away from them, and it just reduces them to randomly finding you instead of directly hunting you. And air magic is also vital for casting the best fire spell in the game. So let's talk about fire. Fire is Fire Burst at rank 1, Fireball at rank 3, and Air 1. And Meteor Storm. Meteor Storm is the strongest spell in the game. It costs 5 fire magic and 3 air magic, and allows you to fire 5 fire bolts in a row with a single spell cast. It's expensive. It takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of skill points to use, but it is the best thing that your mages can do, and it's ranged. And this is why ranged weapons, I think, are mediocre, is because you have magic, particularly fire and air magic, to deal that damage at ranged. Yes, it requires energy. It takes up energy. But if you're smart with your energy and aren't wasting it, then you can do quite a bit with it. And you get so much ether weed, especially if you just swim at the bottom of every lake and catch and bring up all the ether weed from the bottom of lakes. You will almost never run out of energy potions if you need to just keep spamming them. Granted, I haven't done like a full 4-mage build. I think that sounds insane. But fire and air magic is definitely part of an optimal build, and it's hard to really put one above the other. But also, yes, concentration. I am going to bump concentration up like I do armor to solid build, just because the power and the importance of it is so good, even if you're not really going to be using it as like rank 5 concentration. You're going to get to rank 2, maybe rank 3, and that's about it. But Force Field, Light, Darkness, Shield, Dark Bolt, which, I mean, I don't know. I've never found a purpose in using Dark Bolt, but there are so many things you can do with it. Anyway, what are your thoughts? Have you actually played Legend of Grimrock 2? I know it's a bit of a dead game at this point because it came out years and years ago, but I don't care. It's fun. I like it. I like talking about it. I hope you enjoyed the video, and until next time, this is Mithril Zenith signing out.